Welcome back everyone. If you have been following along with our IGCSE Physics Tips and Strategies series, you already know how to tackle the multiple choice paper. But today, we are moving on to something that many students find more challenging and more frankly, more important for your overall grade. Paper 3 or Paper 4, which is a structured questions paper. This is where examiners really get to see whether you truly understand physics or whether you have just memorized a bunch of formulas and facts. Here's what makes this paper different and in many ways more demanding. The multiple choice paper tests whether you can recognize the right answer when you see it. But the structured paper, it tests whether you can construct the right answer from scratch, explain your reasoning, and apply physics concepts to real-world situations. There's nowhere to hide on this paper, which is exactly why it's so critical that you approach it with the right strategies. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly what this paper demands from you, how it differs from the MCQ paper, and more importantly, the specific techniques you need to maximize your marks. So let's dive in and break this down step by step. Let's start by understanding what you're facing on exam day. Paper 3 or Paper 4 gives you 1 hour and 15 minutes to work through 10 to 12 questions. Now, before you think that sounds easier than 40 questions in 45 minutes, let me explain why this is actually more complex. These aren't simple standalone questions. Most of them contain multiple sub-questions labeled as Part A, Part B, Part C, and so on. You might have a question about energy that starts by asking you to calculate kinetic energy in Part A, then asks you to explain energy conservation in Part B, and finally asks you to describe what happens in a specific scenario in Part C. Each question is really testing multiple skills and layers of understanding. However, similar to the MCQ paper, the questions generally follow the chronological order of the syllabus. So you will encounter topics in roughly the same sequence as you have learned them during your course. But here's what's fundamentally different about this paper. This paper tests your understanding of physics concepts in much greater depth. The examiners aren't just checking whether you know that force equals mass times acceleration. They want to see if you can use that principle as a reasoning tool to explain why a heavy truck is harder to accelerate than a small car, or to predict what happens when forces are unbalanced in a particular situation. This paper is all about application. You need to demonstrate that you can take the physics you have learned and use it to make sense of real-world scenarios, solve practical problems, and communicate your understanding clearly. This is the paper where your genuine comprehension really shines through, or where gaps in your understanding become obvious. Moving on, let's talk about how to prepare for this type of paper. Your preparation strategy needs to be different from how you prepared for this multiple choice paper because the demands are different. First, just like with the MCQ paper, if you struggle with remembering formulas, create a formula sheet. This becomes even more valuable for the structured paper because you will encounter calculation questions that require you to select the right formula, rearrange it correctly, substitute values, and show your working. Having practiced writing down these formulas during your revision means they will come to you more naturally under exam pressure. But remember, you're not just memorizing the formula itself. You need to understand when to use it and how to manipulate it. Here's the golden rule that I cannot emphasize enough. Never memorize concepts without understanding them. This is 10 times more important for the structured paper than for the multiple choice. Why? Because on this paper, you can't just recognize the right answer. You have to explain things in your own words. If you have only memorized that energy cannot be created or destroyed, for example, you will struggle when a question asks you to explain what happens to the electrical energy supplied in a motor. that's lifting a weight. You need to understand that electrical energy is being transformed into kinetic energy, then gravitational potential energy, heat, and sound. You need to be able to trace the energy transfers and transformations, not just recite a memorized principle. Connect every concept you learn to simple real-life examples. When you're studying pressure, for example, don't just learn the formula pressure equals force divided by the area. Think about why a sharp knife cuts better than a blunt one, why you sink into sand but not into solid ground, and why drawing pins have sharp points and wide heads. These mental connections mean that when you see an unfamiliar scenario in the exam, you can reason your way through it, using your understanding rather than panicking because you haven't memorized the exact situation. Now, here's something crucial about paper 3 or paper 4. There is no exact weightage given to any particular topic. On the multiple choice paper, you might notice that certain topics appear more frequently, but on the structured paper, everything is fair game and everything matters. This means your revision strategy needs to be comprehensive. You cannot afford to skip topics or leave gaps in your knowledge. A single question on the structured paper might be worth 4, 5, or even 6 marks. And if it's on a topic you decided to skip, that's a significant chunk of your grade gone. That said, you should still practice topical past papers once you feel confident with a specific topic. The difference is that you shouldn't stop there. After practicing individual topics, you need to move on to practicing full papers that mix all the topics together, because that's what you will face in the actual exam. Let me now walk you through a 3-step method that helped me and will help you tackle every question on this paper effectively. This is a systematic approach that keeps you focused and helps you extract maximum marks from each question. Step 1 is to read the question or scenario very carefully. I know this sounds obvious, but here's what most students miss. You need to read it multiple times, and each time you're looking for something different. The first time you read it, you are getting the overall picture. What's the scenario? What's happening? Is this about a car moving, an electric circuit, heat transfer, or something else? The second time you read it, you are looking for the specific information you are given. What numbers are provided? What do they represent? Are there any diagrams, graphs, or data tables you need to analyze? The third time, you are identifying exactly what the question is asking you to do. This brings us to step 2, understanding what the question wants from you by paying very close attention to the command words. This is absolutely critical, and it's where so many students lose marks unnecessarily. The examiners use very specific keywords, and each one demands a different type of response. For example, when a question says state, it's asking for a short, simple answer with no explanation required. You might need to state a definition, state a formula, or state a fact, so keep it brief. When it says describe, you need to paint a picture with words. If you are describing how light travels through a prism, you would talk about the light entering the prism, bending toward the normal, then exiting and bending away from the normal, with different colors bending by different amounts. Here, you are giving a clear account of what happens, step by step. When the question says explain, this is where you need to go deeper. You're not just saying what happens, you're saying why it happens. You need to use physics principles to justify what you're describing. For example, if you are explaining why a ball falls to the ground, you would talk about the gravitational force acting on the ball, causing it to accelerate downward. Here you are connecting cause and effect using physics concepts. Other important command words include calculate, which means you need to show your working and arrive at a numerical answer, and suggest, which is asking you to apply your understanding to an unfamiliar situation where you might not even have a memorized answer. Understanding these command words is like having a secret decoder for what the examiner wants. When you know exactly what type of answer is required, you can target your response perfectly and avoid wasting time writing more than necessary, or worse, writing less than what's needed. Step 3 is about how you present your answer. You need to write concise and clear answers, either in point form or paragraph form, depending on what feels more natural for that particular question. Here's an important constraint you need to respect. Do not write anything beyond the space provided. The examiners design the answer space based on how much they expect you to write for full marks. If there are 3 lines provided, they are expecting about 3 lines of response. If you find yourself needing twice as much space, it usually means one of two things. Either you're including irrelevant information, or you're not being concise enough in expressing your ideas. This doesn't mean you should write tiny or cramped handwriting to fit more in. It means you should think carefully about what's essential to answer the question and express it clearly and effectively. Quality over quantity is the rule here. Time management on the structured paper requires a different approach than on the multiple choice. You have 1 hour and 15 minutes for 10 to 12 questions, which gives you roughly 7 to 8 minutes per question. But remember, these questions often have multiple parts, so you need to divide that time appropriately. Here's a practical approach. The marks allocated to each question part are your guide. If part A is worth 2 marks, it should take you about 2 to 3 minutes. If part C is worth 5 marks, you might need 5 to 6 minutes on it. The marks tell you how much work the examiners expect from you. A 1 mark question might need just a single word or a simple calculation. A 5 mark question might require a detailed explanation with multiple physics principles connected together. Lastly, you absolutely must leave at least 15 minutes at the end for reviewing. This is not optional. During these 15 minutes, you are checking several things. First, have you answered every part of every question? It's surprisingly easy to accidentally skip a sub-question, especially when you are working quickly. Second, are your calculations correct? Go back through your arithmetic and make sure you didn't make any silly errors. Third, have you included units where required? Marks are often lost for missing units. Fourth, is your handwriting legible and your presentation clear? And speaking of presentation, this is where many students underestimate what's required. The key to cracking this paper is not just accuracy, but also presentation. Your answers need to make the examiner's job easy. The reality is, the examiner might be reading dozens or even hundreds of papers. If your answer is clearly laid out, easy to follow, and well organized, you're more likely to get the benefit of the doubt on borderline decisions. This means using clear diagrams when appropriate, labeling everything carefully, showing you're working in calculation step by step, and writing in complete, well-structured sentences for explanation questions. Think of it this way. You're not just demonstrating your physics knowledge, you're communicating it effectively. Both matter equally. Now, if you want structured support as you prepare for IGCSE Physics exams, let me tell you about 3 key features that make Examify IGCSE Prep different. First, our mock papers stimulate real exam conditions so you can build your exam readiness before it actually counts. We provide detailed feedback that identifies exactly where you're losing marks, whether it's timing issues, calculation errors, or conceptual gaps, so you can fix these problems while there's still time. Second, our productivity sessions teach you how to study smarter, not just harder. You will learn proven techniques for managing your time, maintaining focus, and creating sustainable study habits that prevent burnout while maximizing your results. Third, our doubt clearing sessions give you direct access to experienced tutors who work through any concept you're struggling with until it completely makes sense. No question is too basic, and we take the time to find the explanation approach that works for your brain. So, if you're serious about maximizing your IGCSE physics score, check out the link in the description box below to learn more about Examify IGCSE Prep and our limited cohort offers. We would love to support your success. Finally, let's bring everything together. Paper 3 or 4 of IGCSE Physics is your opportunity to show real, deep understanding of physics concepts and how they apply to the world around you. Unlike multiple choice, there's nowhere to hide, but that also means it's your chance to really shine. Prepare by understanding all concepts thoroughly, not by memorizing. Use the 3-step method for every question. Read carefully to understand the scenario, identify exactly what the command word is asking for, and present your answers concisely within the space provided. Manage your time using the marks as your guide, aiming for about 7 to 8 minutes per question, and always leave 15 minutes for review. Remember that presentation matters just as much as content on this paper. Make your answers clear, organized, and easy for the examiner to follow. If you have found this guide helpful, please hit that like button and subscribe for more IGCSE content. Check out the description below for information about our Examify IGCSE program, where we offer mock papers, productivity sessions, and doubt clearing sessions to support you throughout your revision journey. You have got this. With the right preparation and the right approach, you can absolutely excel on this paper. Good luck with your studies, and I'll see you in the next video.